What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Southern Outdoorsmen podcast. Me and Jacob are going to do a quick little intro before we get into our main interview today. We got some pretty awesome guests, and we did a great podcast. It was a lot of fun. Can't wait to have these guys back on, but we'll get to them in a second. Jacob, what's been going on?
Dude, work, man. Closing deals. Hopefully going to be able to get out and go scouting this weekend. But, man, I'm absolutely jacked up about this podcast. I mean, it was awesome. Not trying to hype us up too much or pat ourselves on the back, but I think this is going to be a really good one. I'm super excited. I think a lot of people are going to get a ton out of it. Other than that, talking about this podcast, again, haven't been doing much, just working, trying to now plan on you and me doing a muskie fishing trip up here in Tennessee. Fun fact, guys, for anyone that doesn't live in Tennessee, or maybe you do live in Tennessee and just don't know, muskie are actually native to Tennessee, and they're actually a very good population in Middle Tennessee. So we're going to try to do some trips up here, do some float trips for some muskie, dude. I'm talking almost 50 inches long, so that would be awesome. Other than that, dude, just kind of getting set ready for this July velvet buck hunt. But what have you been up to, Andrew?
You're going to go hunt velvet bucks in July?
Oh, dude, I said July.
You're going to use a spotlight too while you're at it?
Yeah, that'll be a problem. Jesus. No, I'm in August. God.
Oh, man. Dude, this is a trend, man. Last week we had a screwed up intro, and now this week we got a screwed up intro. But that's the beauty of podcasts. We can do whatever we want.
Yeah, you're right. It's like, why be perfect, man? No one wants to be perfect. I mean, come on. I mean, editing and photoshopping, man, that's not us. We're keeping it raw. But other than that, other than me talking about hunting bucks in July, yeah, that'd be an issue for sure.
Yeah.
What you been up to, dude?
Well, dude, I had the biggest fiasco today. So last night I went out to the woods for like 2 hours to do an observation sit, and it wasn't too terribly exciting. I saw a yearling doe, blew a couple deer out of the area I was in. It was pretty cool that I had a coyote run from the other side of the field and get within like 10 yards of me. I've had that up on the Instagram story. For all those who follow us on Instagram, you probably saw that. That was fun. And then I woke up this morning and my front driver's side tire was completely flat, which was great. Which it wasn't too big of a deal because I was just getting some work done from home today with like articles and everything and squaring away stuff with the website and all that. So I was like, whatever, I'll change it in a little while. I gotta go get started on this other crap anyways. So I get bogged down working, and then I don't know, probably 10 o'clock. I waited just long enough for it to get hot outside. I go out there, I'm like, oh crap, I need to take this tire off and put the spare on. So I go out there, get the spare down, and I start taking all the lug nuts off of the front of the car on the tire that needs to be changed. And I get all of them off, and then the last one just doesn't want to budge. And so I I kick the tire tool trying to unbudge this thing, trying to unlock this nut that's stuck on there. And the stupid thing basically kind of strips it a little bit. So I get real mad, and I'm not having a good time at this point. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go inside, and I'm going to calm down for a little while. And long story short, it took me like 6 hours to get that thing off. And I finally got it off. And I get the thing off, and then the middle piece of the like rod that you use to screw to turn the jack to lift the car up, the middle rod is missing, and I don't know what happened to it. And so I'm like, oh, dude, I'm about to throw a temper tantrum. So I'm like, dude, I'm mad. I'm having a bad day. And then I go inside and I like burn my hand trying to cook something for lunch. It was a stressful day. But when I took like my little lunch break, I scouted some maps, and I have narrowed down the spots that I'm going to go scout in Georgia for velvet bucks.
Yeah, that's awesome. Speaking about writing articles, did you just have an article published relatively recently?
Yeah, I'm in the July issue of Alabama Outdoor News. I did a article in there about creek fishing with an ultralight in Alabama and where to do it, how to know if a stream is public land or not. So yeah, y'all can go check that out in the latest issue of Alabama Outdoor News, and then I should have a couple more coming out with them this year, and then a whole bunch next year. So that's exciting.
Yeah, Andrew's getting into pretty hardcore into the outdoor riding world, so that's pretty cool, man. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty cool. I remember the first time y'all had when you had one of your full articles up. I guess it was last year, 2 years ago. And the one about the trail cameras was awesome. So it's kind of cool seeing that. But other than that, man, I am excited about this episode. I think we've talked enough. Unless you have anything else you want to add, I think we got to jump straight into this episode.
I will add this. So if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have figured this out by now, that we did some stuff, just SEO stuff, trying to make ourselves more findable, and somehow managed to make iTunes unsubscribe some people. So I don't know if it unsubscribed you guys, but it unsubscribed me and Jacob. So if you're listening, odds are you already figured that out. But if you figured it out, tell your buddies because they might not know. They're like, hey, what happened to the Southern Outdoorsmen? They're gone. So yeah, tell your buddies. And also, while you're at it, we'd really appreciate some reviews. That helps us a lot. We always appreciate it when people leave us reviews. I think we've got like 22 or something now. So thanks to everybody who has left us a review already. Y'all are awesome. And
yeah,
Jacob?
I was gonna say to add to that. Yeah, I mean, if you enjoy the number one thing you can do to give back to the podcast and give back to us is leave us a review. That is the one way you can truly we can, you know, if you appreciate the podcast, is one way you can show it is leaving us a review. So we absolutely love that, guys. Again, if you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a review on iTunes. We really do enjoy seeing them, reading them, and overall helps the podcast grow. So we do appreciate that. But, Andrew, I think we ought to jump straight into this week's episode. What do you think?
I think so. Without us babbling any longer, here is our interview with the guys from Land and Legacy. What's up, guys? Welcome to episode number 35 of the Southern Outdoorsman podcast. Today we got some pretty cool guests on, some guys that I've followed for quite a while, ever since they were with Growing Deer. Now they've started their own thing, Land and Legacy. I'm talking about Adam Keith and Matt Dye. How are y'all doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks for coming on, man. Jacob, what's up?
Not much, man. I'm excited about this week's episode. I know we're kind of doing a pretty cool episode with all four of us in different areas of the country right now, so this is going to be pretty cool. Get a lot of cool information from both Adam and Matt about their region of the country and, answer some hot topics right now, especially in this time of the year. Andrew, what have you been up to? How have you been so far?
I've been up to being busy and not doing stuff in the woods, but I did get out on a little observation sit yesterday and had a coyote run up to me at like 10 yards, so I guess that was neat. And then I saw a yearling doe. So that was fun, but what's up? What have you been up to, Jacob?
Not much, about the same. About to get some trail camera set up. But enough about us. Let's talk about Adam and Matt a little bit. Guys, I'd love for you guys just to do a little intro on yourself. Give us a little background about both of you guys. First of all, where y'all live, for anyone that might not know the region of the country, and a little bit about y'all's background and what y'all do for a living right now.
Yeah, sure thing. So we live in Springfield, Missouri, which is southwest Missouri. I'm originally from Virginia, grew up there for 20 years and then moved out for an opportunity working with Adam at Growing Deer when I was in college, and then came back out full time. From there, we started Land and Legacy, which is a consulting company. We do habitat management across the country, working with private landowners and their properties. And then we also do our weekly podcast as well, and do some short films, and our real estate agents too.
That's sweet, man. Sounds like y'all have a dream job.
We're busy, that's for sure. And we absolutely are so blessed to do what we do and see the properties that we see, meet the folks, because they're hunters just like you and I. And they just want to do the right things for the land and get the most enjoyment they can out of it. So you got to appreciate that, and being able to call them clients and friends is an awesome opportunity.
Yeah, man. So you said that y'all are basically land managers. What does that entail? What do you guys do on a day-to-day basis for your clients?
So for most of the clients, we are touring on site with their property. They'll reach out to us and we'll establish what type of plan that they want, and then from there we go ahead and visit the property, get boots on the ground, and tour it with them. We want to see 90+% of the property while on site, and then we'll go back home, write up a management plan to accomplish their goals, and that can cover anything from TSI to food plots to old field management to prescribed fire to predator management to water resources on a property. Anything and everything that needs to be addressed, we'll include and kind of get them to the point where they can reach their goals. Adam works and creates maps, custom maps for the properties, and send them off, and then they have all that information, and we're there for them as they go through that growing season of how do I do these, how do I implement all this plan. So we're always there to answer questions. So the day-to-day basis is meeting new clients, touring properties, and corresponding, keeping up with existing clients.
Sweet,
Yeah, I'll say that.
man.
I was gonna say, yeah, and that's pretty cool. I mean, just to have a profession like that. But I gotta ask, what got both of y'all's mindsets to want to do something like this? Was it just your mindset and background, just loving the outdoors and everything, or what really drove y'all to wanting to really manage other people's properties and kind of go about doing that business?
I think for me, and I believe Matt's the same way, but it came from a lot of our upbringing and trying to do it on our own, and a lot of mistakes that we made, a lot of time spent on certain things that really didn't end up being very profitable for us or very productive for us. And so it came down to the fact of the love for the land and trying to help people improve it in the very best way that we know how. And a lot of that just came from the mistakes we made early on.
Yeah, for sure. And I was just going to add to that. We both come from farming backgrounds, and that mindset of trying to work the land, be a part of it, and then the love for hunting, they just melted together. And so we became habitat consultants and manager of the habitat versus, crop and grain production or cattle production. So, having that background and kind of marrying the two together really brought all this together.
Yeah, I think that's pretty awesome. Again, just kind of both y'all combining y'all's ideas on everything, y'all's backgrounds, and having y'all's really passion for what you like to do and be able to make a profession about that. That's unreal. I mean, a lot of people want to have a job, profession, career that they really love to do, and watching y'all's content, listening to y'all's content, and seeing what you guys do, I can truly tell that y'all love what y'all do. And that's one thing I know a lot of people are jealous about because they wish they had a profession or career that was similar to you guys, and be able to do that every day. And now I got to ask, what to become a land manager? Is that something that's more about experience, or do you need an educational background or something like that, or what does it take to be able to get to that point in your career to be able to do that?
I think we kind of came from different backgrounds. For me, it was I came into the consulting and land management thing a little bit differently than Matt did. Now he went to college and studied something similar to that, and then took a job with another consulting property management firm. I kind of went into college with an agriculture degree, and then I took another job in the industry managing and filming, and that just kind of opened up the door. So for me, it was about who I knew and how I got there, and hard work. And for Matt, it was, of course, hard work, but also having the background of college and going into it that way. So it's for me, I would believe that a little bit of both, and either way, it all comes down to, with most things, it's who you know and what you know.
Yeah, so I'd imagine, it sounds like y'all are in a pretty niche industry. So are there a lot of other guys that do what you do, or is it just like a handful of people around the country?
I think there's actually getting to be more and more people, more land management firms and consulting firms. For us, I don't know if there's many that travel the country as much as us. I can think of a handful that travel as much as we do, but I don't know. I think there's definitely getting to be more and more people trying to do land management.
I mean, with y'all's backgrounds kind of being covered and everything, I kind of want to start jumping into some of your expertise on subjects like, TSI, timber stand improvement, and then like you mentioned, old field management, which I think might be kind of forgotten down here in the South, which that kind of goes hand in hand with invasives, I guess. So when you're talking about timber stand improvement, what are some of the things that you guys do on a property? Like, what are your goals? What are some things that you look for? Just kind of a general overview of it, I guess.
Yeah, I think Matt and I both have a response on that one, because when it comes to TSI and specifically, pre-show we talked about Missouri, Arkansas region, and there's a lot of that region that's timbered, and not just pine plantation, but more oak stands and hickory stands anymore. But basically, overall, for TSI for us is trying to improve the health of the timber stand. And looking at a lot of it around here is it's been used and neglected for years, of logging operations coming in, cutting out the best, leaving the trees that don't provide much income, and that being what gets to regenerate or provide the next generation of trees. And so we've had years and years of bad timber management. And so for us and and across the country, TSI basically stands for improving the overall health while providing benefits to the wildlife. So cutting out a lot of the trees that have just withstood the timber harvesting. So here in our area, specifically hickories. So logging company comes in, cuts out most of the oaks, and leaves all the hickories. And that happens 2 generations in a row, and you have what was once oak hickory forest now is a hickory maybe oak forest, very dominated by hickory. So it's removing a large majority of those hickories out and letting the oaks come back to being more of a native landscape of oak savanna or oak woodland type landscape. Matt, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think what you touched on there is understanding the history. What has occurred there on site in the past? Like how's a landowner come to this property? What happened before him? Why are we seeing what we've seen? Was it a clear cut 10 years ago? Was it a clear cut 30 years ago? Was it a select cut? Understanding some of that and what has regenerated and at what rate and composition of trees has regenerated will help us make decisions on how to manage it in the future. If we kind of know what the site itself may do, how it responds to disturbances in past events, past timbering events, then we can know, okay, what we're probably going to face when we do open up the canopy more and begin to do TSI projects here, you're going to be facing a lot of regeneration from, like I said, either hickory, or you might get some volunteer pines. We see that in our area. A lot of those were cut out years and years ago, but in specific sites, we begin to open up the canopy, we get a lot of pines, and because it's native, we want to see that more, while other people may not and aren't managing for that. So it's understanding a lot of the site index, what happened prior, and then again, specifically on that portion of the property, what's needed from a wildlife standpoint. Is it within proximity to a food source? Do we need to create some young forest or early successional habitat in these areas for bedding opportunities or for additional forage? It's a big job when you begin to manage and do TSI, because again, what you're doing affects things in the future. So understanding that mindset of what I'm going to do now has a lasting effect, and just being cautious of that or conscious of that really will make you hopefully decide on the right management technique.
And I'm going to add one more thing to that. A lot of times when we say TSI, one of the things we hear back quickly is like hinge cutting. And that's one thing that's very important to be clear on, is that hinge cutting is not timber stand improvement. And I think in this day and age, hinge cutting has been so trendy that people automatically assume, I think I need to do some TSI. That means I'm going to go out and hinge a bunch of trees over. And that's kind of one of those lasting effects that could be a huge no-no on a property, especially not knowing what species to hinge cut or what species to TSI. And so hinge cutting to us is a technique that you can use on a small scale to improve some bedding or help steer some deer, but it's certainly not a broad scale or large area management tool.
Yeah, hinge cutting, I'm kind of glad you brought that up because I wouldn't have thought of it. But I remember when the hinge cutting thing started, and I'm, by no means like a professional land manager, but I am very interested in the subject and I follow it closely. And when hinge cutting came up, and I was watching this YouTube video of this guy, and he hinge cut like every tree on his property just about. And I was just looking at that like, man, that just doesn't seem like it was a very good idea. So I guess, most people, when they think of hinge cutting, they're thinking about, toppling over a tree to create browse or to create bedding cover, I'm guessing. So what are some of the maybe pros and cons of, instead, where should you utilize hinge cutting and where should you not?
So when it comes to hinge cutting, I think one of the lines that I chuckle at is it's overhead cover. Just because I chuckle at it because it's kind of like what are we trying to protect from overhead? Like, what's going to come from above that needs to protect the deer? As far as, pterodactyls are long extinct, so it's like for me, I look at it more of one thing we really need to manage better is sunlight, and so I want to allow as much sunlight onto the forest floor as possible to get more growth. But when it comes to hinge cutting, we use those in small scale areas that we call them bedding thickets, and it's areas that we really try to make it even thicker than the surrounding area. So in timber chunks, we may have little polka dotted spots where it's almost like, we use Deer Lab. I'm just trying to think of a way, but it's kind of like more centrally located. Heat map on Deer Lab is what I'm referring to, but it's a darker, more open area. And so by TSIing and then using the hinge cutting, so these little bedding thickets are, I don't know, Matt, half an acre to an acre, maybe 2 acres in bigger spots, that we just go in and cut out a large majority of the trees that are there, and a third of those get hinge cut. And it's just to get some regrowth out of certain species of trees like dogwoods and elms that do a lot of resprouting. We hinge a lot more of those than we do almost any other species, just because they regrow so well that we can get a little bit more growth and have more browse out of those species.
Yeah, like Adam said, hinge cutting is not a Band-Aid that's a fix-all, you're going to solve the world's or the timber issues on your place by hinge cutting. It's select species and in select areas to accomplish specific goals. And like I said, when we're in those bedding area thickets, it's only a third of the tree population that's actually getting hinged. Others are getting flush cut. Others are getting flush cut and then treated with the herbicide on the stump because it's an undesirable. Even if it does regenerate, we don't want it, and it's going to be very little forage, if any forage, for species. So it's determining the composition and the species that are within that timber stand to know if they need to be hinged. And Adam brought up a really, really good point that is not often talked about when considering managing deer in general, but timber specifically, and that's managing the sunlight. We've got to consider it because that's an energy source that's going to create more forage at the appropriate level for deer, turkey, and quail to utilize. If we've got complete closed canopy, that sun will not get down to the forest floor where those deer, turkey, and quail are making a living. So the more sunlight, the more energy that gets there, the more food and cover that they're going to have. So managing the timber in association with the sunlight is a super important, mentality, honestly, for land managers, hunters, to adapt.
Okay. And I think one of you mentioned creating browse through hinge cutting. Now, is like mineral stumps, if I'm using that term correctly, something that you guys ever utilize where a tree is flush cut and then the stump starts sprouting, and the sprouts off of that stump have a lot of nutrients in them. I was recently on some public land that we hunt, and I found a stump like that was just absolutely mowed down. I mean, it was crazy looking. It was browse so heavy. But is that something you guys ever utilize?
Yeah, I think MSU Deer Lab's the one that really brought that on the scene and talk about, and a lot of people are starting to use that. I think, and I believe they recommend cutting that after the tree has canopied out, and letting that regen come up. That part of for us has been something that we've used just in the TSI of just cutting the tree and let it regen back over the time period of cutting it. That is something we've used and haven't really. I guess it was almost one of those things that it was happening and we didn't really realize that it was a mineral stump until something like the MSU Deer Lab thing came out, to where it's actually a technique people use. It was more of just a technique of TSI for us that we noticed deer really browsing on those regenerative sprouts.
Yeah, there's basically it's a technique that any logging operation or someone doing TSI could experience, but now because of the science behind it, so now that there's a catchy name to associate with this, like again, the science is there. There's a lot of great mineral uptake from the soil to these sprouts, and deer are hammering them. So there's a catchy name. It's catching on, and that's great for deer managers though, because it's an extremely good technique to be using. There's a lot of benefits. In the wintertime, browse is 80% of a deer's diet. So the more that you can create by doing TSI and by cutting and allowing these stumps to resprout, man, you're offering a lot of forage. And in some cases, if you do enough and they're not completely foraging and keeping them at a short height, you have cover as well. That's the best of both worlds.
Okay. So I want to kind of use the whole hinge cutting and everything, as a segue into the old field management, like creating cover, creating browse, I guess. So in a nutshell, what is old field management?
To me, I think when I think of old field, I think of an opening, big or small, that's not devoted to food plot and not in some sort of perennial grass or whatever perennial species. Old field to me has got a high diverse mixture of weeds, some perennials, a lot of annuals, some woody species in there. Just high diversity, very beneficial to a large variety of species.
And all that diversity of species offers forage throughout much of the year, and then cover as well. It's at the right height to offer cover to quail, to turkeys, to fawns, to full-grown deer, adult deer. And so again, those acres that are devoted to old field management are both offering forage and cover. So really maximizing all the acreage you got.
Key word with that being management. Just because it's an old field that's mostly fescue or down south Bahia or something like that, that doesn't mean it's old field management. The management part would be removing that non-native perennial grass and allowing more beneficial species to grow up. So in our area, if we do old field management correctly, we get a lot of ragweed, goldenrod, pokeberry, lots of woody species coming in, and that's all managed with fire to keep those woody species in more of a shrubby state than growing up into more of a young forest in what was once old field.
Okay, so is an old field type ecosystem something that you guys want to create on a property, or is it something that if it's there you want to maintain it, or maybe if there's a field that's full of invasives, you might transition it into like an old field type habitat? But is that something you'd like whack down some timber to create, or is it something that if it's there you'll take it?
If it's there, definitely take it, enhance it, manage it, because again, those are acres that are devoted to forage and cover, and that doesn't happen that often. If we can do that or manage it, keep it in that same state, no doubt we're going to do that.
Well, you might have just shifted the whole course of this podcast by asking that question, because I'm getting ready to go into something I really love to talk about. But when we look at managing our ground, Matt and I spend so much time looking at the historical data or the historical information on what was here pre-settlement. So what did the explorers see when they first started coming through? And Oldfield to me is something that's more of a early successional site. So it could be whether, to me, I think of so many annuals being in there. So it's a site that's came in quickly after a disturbance, whether that be grazing from the buffalo way back when, or a ripping fire in late summer, and you get a lot more forbs growing rather than perennial grasses. And so we always look at trying to provide the most benefit on our land and trying to replicate nature. And so old field management is one of those that it could come in the form of converting a perennial cool season grass, fescue pasture, whatever, to more beneficial, or it could come from clearing out and doing more of a clear cut, and so you get a lot more annuals coming in, or it could come as far as crop field, leaving it fallow, and you get a lot more weeds growing up the next year and never planting it. You just have crop residual from the previous year, but a lot more weeds coming up.
Now, one thing about this topic that I think a lot of people listening now are wondering, like, well, why don't I just plant that into a food plot? You know, they see a field, they're like, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to brush hog it, I'm going to spray it, I'm going to till it up, I'm going to plant it. And that's across the board, everyone I've ever ran into, that's what they think of. Like, I mean, I'm guilty of that as well, until I started learning a little bit more about how to manage a property and manage your habitat a little bit better, so you have more diversity. Because I think the diversity is huge, and again, a lot of people think that, you know, I plant a food plot, I was going to have a lot of food there, but it has no cover. Where, you know, an old field that you kind of manage, run fires through, and, you know, manage it how you want it, is going to have a lot more cover and food throughout the year than a food plot could. And I think that's one issue that you find across the board, but especially in the South. I mean, I know guys, they pick up a lease, or they pick up, you know, maybe they buy some property, and maybe it used to be an old cattle farm, to give an example. And, you know, there's big old fields, and they're like, I want to till up every inch of field that there is. I'm going to have 10, 12, 15 acre food plots, and that is their goal. And I mean, would y'all talk about that and how maybe that's not the greatest idea for some people, and how they should maybe do some more of that, you know, maybe cut half that back to actually make into, you know, manage properties, manage fields?
That's a very, very good question.
For me, there's 2 points that come to mind. One being, if every single opening that you have, and this is from a hunting standpoint, if everything is food in a food plot, how do you traverse your property? How do you access? How do you hunt it? Because, you know, it's desirable to hunt over a food plot. Everyone sees it on TV. That's just, you know, what seems like the easy thing to do. And everyone wants to kill a great buck over a food plot. You know, they want the fruits of their labor to be rewarded with a great hunt. But if you can't access your property, and access your tree stands without alerting deer, then you're not really going to be very successful hunting at all. The second point is old field management really only requires your time, very little funds from like monetary wise, whereas a food plot, potentially you have a lot of time devoted to it, as well as inputs from fertilizer to equipment to food plot seed, and then you could end up, you know, getting into a drought season, and you have nothing to show for it. Whereas the old field is going to be adapted to drier conditions and be able to still offer forage and cover at the same time through those dry periods. So if we devote everything we've got open-wise to food plots, we're really missing the ball potentially on a lot of great habitat.
I'm going to say third point to Matt's first two is old field is much more beneficial to other species outside of just the deer. So if you were to convert all your open acres to, let's just say, soybeans, because it's the one of the most popular, you're not really providing much benefit to, if any, especially when you look at it from the whole year standpoint, to, let's say, a bobwhite quail or even down to the insects. So doing more old field is much more beneficial to those other species.
Okay, so kind of speaking about fire, I know that you guys do a lot of burning in your line of work. So When do you guys typically like to burn? Are you burning kind of early in the year, late winter, or are you burning closer into, maybe April or May?
Well, with everything, I think on the very last podcast we did, we said if you could sum up Land and Legacy podcast in one word, it would be diversity. So, sorry I can't give you a straight answer and say we like to burn in April. It's pretty much any time, as we said earlier, replicating nature. So anytime historically it gets really dry, you get lightning strikes, and so you can have fires. But a lot of our fires happen in the dormant season, but we also try to get some of those growing season fires. So anywhere from December to even May, if it's dry, and then July to October. The thing about it is we try to burn on more small scale than burning hundreds of acres at a time. So it may be 50 to 100 or even down to less than 20 acres, just trying to break up the landscape and fragment it more with diversity.
And the reason behind doing those at different times of the year is the ecosystem is going to respond differently. You're going to get a different flush of vegetation by burning at different times of the year. So if you have an area that's dominated with grasses, you could burn it in the growing season, have a better response of forbs the next year. So it kind of depends on your objectives for each unit that you want to burn as well. So that's another reason why there's that not so straightforward answer. Really depends on the site.
Yeah, okay. That's a good answer. That's kind of what I was looking for. So right now there's kind of a controversy in the Southeast about like nesting season burns, I guess you'd say. People burning while the hens are on nest, or maybe right after a hatch happens, and people are afraid they're burning up the poults or they're burning up a nest. And it's too much to get into, but people are saying the Forest Service is like burning 1,400 acres at a time, black to black, several parcels in a row next to each other, and they're afraid they're killing all the turkeys. What's your take on like a nesting season burn? If a hen's nest is burned up, how far does she go to re-nest? Will she re-nest? Will there be as many poults when she re-nests? Can you just kind of give a brief overview of that subject?
Well, did you hear that, Matt? He said he asked us 20
brief.
questions and he asked for a brief answer.
Yep.
I
realized
that's
that at the end.
Oh,
You're wasting time. You better.
Brief. Buzz me out. Pass. My brother works for the U.S. Forest Service, and he's in Arkansas actually, and so he's on forums and has been at public speaking times or whatever events, and that is a huge hot topic. And I think, to me, once again, replicating nature, lightning strike fires was not typically done. If you look at it historically, it wasn't something that occurred during the winter as much as spring and late spring, and right there in that nesting season. And for us, I'll give you a first-hand an example. We did a fire that was late in the spring. It was mid-May, to where a lot of people were putting out things saying, "Don't burn. It's time to start wrapping up the fires because it's getting into nesting season." But we always manage for the population and not the individual. And so when we burned, we only burned about 100 acres. And we knew there was probably some nests out there. But for the whole benefit of the population, we burned anyway and really set back the non-native cool season perennials such as smooth brome and fescue and Reed's Canary. And when we set those back, we returned several months later to see a huge abundance of native warm season grasses and forbs and all kinds of beneficial species out there, and the quail going crazy, whistling, turkeys around. And so if we did burn up a few nests, a lot of times they will re-nest. And so that's why it's important to not burn those huge areas, to where even if you do, they don't have to go too far to find the vegetation they need to re-nest.
I'm going to add on to that and say from a mindset standpoint, from someone who might be irritated at growing season burns. Again, what we just talked about the fires is each season offers a response from the vegetation that's going to bring back different things. So that in and of itself is going to help the wildlife. So we can't immediately think of that quick reaction of, oh, where you're burning up the nest. Well, there's other habitat out there. There's likely chances that they're going to re-nest in another area. But I know long term, not the next week or the next month, long term, by burning at this time, the habitat will be better. That makes sense.
Yeah. So if I heard you correctly, some of these burns in that time of year, it works towards trying to knock back invasives and maybe promote other species. So if you burn in February versus May, you're going to have different regeneration coming back. Is that correct?
That's right. So if you burn in February, a lot of time, let's just say we're burning trying to we have an oil field and there's a lot of perennial cool season grasses, such as smooth brome or fescue. If you burn in February, you're just going to have a fescue or smooth brome dominated field after the burn in the next spring, or in the coming months actually. So if you burn in February, in May you're still going to have those smooth brome fescue. If you burn in mid-May or April, wherever your location is, right at the tail end of that, or right in the heart of that grass's growing season, if you burn, you stun it so much that it can't grow as well for the remainder of that growing season, to where you're giving the leg up to the warm season grasses or those wildflowers. Let's just say even ragweed. So you're getting a much more beneficial species returning to that area if you burn a little bit later in the growing season.
Okay, yeah, I got you. So that whole subject is just kind of a can of worms because, man, people are raging over that right now.
Oh man, it's bad, and to me, I'll say something a little bit controversial right here, but the Smokey the Bear campaign did a really good job of scaring people in fire, and fire is managed fire, and the appropriate fire is one of the most tremendous management tools we have. But unfortunately, if it's the way that people have been told about fire, is it's a very scary thing, to where one fire raging in the out west is the same as a prescribed fire in the timber of southern Missouri. And unfortunately, that's just the way society takes it. But there's a huge difference between the two. And so the appropriate managed fire is tremendously beneficial to the landscape. And so that's one of the downfalls of the Smokey the Bear campaign.
I'm going to throw something else in the mix there. I guess my charge to the people who are upset by these fires and things is, what else are you doing to improve the habitat? Because the fires themselves are a tool used to improve the habitat. So if all you're doing is spending your time dissing the fires, that could be used for you to go out and improve the habitat on property you manage. And if you're not doing that, you might not have as big of a leg to stand on. So everyone should be out there trying to achieve the same goals, increase wildlife numbers if they're low in an area, and improve the habitat is a big part of that. So for the Forest Service, that's an objective for them, and that's the time that they have to be able to do it, and an effective time. So everyone should be joining forces to be out there in all the lands that we can, improving the habitat to accomplish the same goals, and that's increase wildlife numbers to the carrying capacity of that land in that area.
Yeah. Now, guys, I have a question for both of y'all. Maybe you can answer for me from experience. We have a family farm in central Alabama. We have had probably about 60% of it we clear-cutted about 6 years ago. We've done checkerboarding fires on it to kind of keep it back and have a really good abundance of native vegetation and grasses and everything. The deer numbers have pretty much doubled. But one issue we have on the property is on the back side is kudzu. Now, kudzu is very popular. You see it a lot throughout the southeast. some other regions may or may not have it, but as y'all probably know, it grows extremely fast. It takes over a forest in a heartbeat, and we have on the backside property, and it hasn't progressed so much onto the property where it's become a huge issue. But there's probably 7 to 8 acres out of almost 100-acre property that it is abundant. When it comes to kudzu, is there any way to be able to manage that effectively? And if so, would it be either herbicides or fire? Or how would you go about trying to manage that?
To my knowledge, herbicide is the best way to control kudzu. I think, and that's one of those too, that herbicide has such a bad name in society, but it's definitely important when you're controlling these invasive species like kudzu and so many other. The long list of species we all have to fight in our area is a lot of times herbicide is going to be your best bet to control it.
Yeah, totally. And if you can, keep a close watch when you do start implementing herbicide. It's not a once and done thing, especially with kudzu. You have to follow up in those years afterwards, that initial treatment, to come back and touch up these areas that need it. So again, it's not a once and done thing. You have to keep monitoring it and keep fighting it.
Yeah, and see what the issue is with our property is we used to lease the property behind it. So we had almost about 200 acres that we had total that all joined. The problem is the property behind us, who a neighbor has now purchased and just has it purchased land. Right adjacent from us, there is an abundance of kudzu. I mean, it's taken over this whole hillside. Actually, it's a whole valley on both sides. It is completely encased, and nothing else grows there. And that's kind of the issue is, from what I see, no matter how much we try to kill on our side, which is, we need to try that, it's always going to keep coming back across the property line. And, they're not going to do anything to manage it. And it's just something that's kind of rampant. So we try to do the best we can at it, but that's definitely something we're going to try to work on more so in the future. But I was going to say, to kind of transition to another topic, unless y'all want to touch on kudzu or any other invasive species like that. I'd love to talk just food plots with you guys. I have quite a big experience helping manage our property for just deer and turkey when it comes to food plots. We've done everything from just your classic winter wheat to soybeans and corn, and had great abundance of activity using different types of food plots. But one thing that I'm interested in is where you guys are located. Being around in the Ozarks, and we have a lot of listeners from that area as well. As y'all know, it's extremely hilly, mountainous, depending on where you're at. There's a lot of rocks. How do you go about if you're in an area like that, whether you're in western, southwestern Missouri or that northern part of Arkansas? How do you go about doing food plots when you have to worry about rocks and everything else like that in uneven ground?
Put it behind you.
Yeah. I think when it comes to rocks, I don't even really know any different when it comes to food plots. But, at the very beginning of the podcast, we talked about things that we've done that have been learning experiences in the negative of what we did that was a big mess up. And one of the biggest mess ups I see across the country is conserving our soil health. And then even when you look at the rock standpoint of every time we go out and we plow and we disc, we just turn up more rocks. And not only are we turning up more rocks, but we're killing our soil health. We're damaging the soil infrastructure. And so for us has always been, how can we conserve the soil health, make the soil health as healthy as possible, and because of that have much more productive food plots. And so there's a lot of ways you can several key principles to improve the soil health, but for us has always been not to till, not to disc. And I say that because the first 10 years of planting food plots on the family farm was a process of a chisel plow and a plow, and then also a disc and then a drag. So it was a long, drawn-out process of just slowly murdering our soil health. And so once we removed that, we've had much more beneficial food plots that can withstand the drought a lot better.
And that's the thing, like whether you're in Southwest Missouri or Northern Arkansas, you're going to have rocks. It's just a matter of facing the fact, really, unless you're you're working in bottom ground in the rivers or creeks alongside of those. So, even in those conditions, we've had good success. We've had great stands of food plots, and that comes from one of our other points that we always like to make and try and encourage people to do is by planting diversity, planting different crops, not just a monoculture of soybeans or a monoculture just corn. So when you have the opportunity is to plant a variety of species at the same time, and each one of them have a certain job to do and grow and peak at different times. So instead of just having a monoculture where, again, there's one option, and if it goes bad, then your whole food plot goes bad. If you have diversity, you have multiple chances. So even in these tough conditions where soil is thin, it's hot, it can get dry, and we do have rocks, planting diversity is a little bit further insurance of, having successful food plots. When in the springtime, right around turkey season, we're planting a 9-species blend of summer annuals. In the fall time, we like to plant, I believe it's 11 species in our fall food plot mixtures. Again, each one of those has a different job to increase the diversity in the soil, keep a growing root system, and manage it and improve that soil health so we know the next year, the following year, we have the best chance possible, for successful food plots.
And, that pretty much hits the nail on the head of what we talked about last week, or actually 2 weeks ago with Chad Richard from North Florida. He manages properties both in North Florida and also South Georgia, and when it comes to his mindset, he's all about diversity. He likes to plant a absolute mess, just a ton of small plots with a whole bunch of different diversity and plants and vegetation in each one. And for the same thing, I mean, the more diversity, the better off you're going to be, especially on your property. Now, one thing that y'all talked about when it comes to tilling, and that is one thing that a lot of people don't realize is, first of all, erosion. When you till, and also, like you said, disturbing of that ground, and it really hurts the health of that of the ground itself. I'm guessing you're all using a drill, no-till drill, if I had to guess. For someone that does not have that resource, where they don't have the finances to purchase a no-till drill, or they don't know anybody they can borrow one or rent one, what would be your recommendation for someone to plant in y'all's region to try to have the best food plots possible?
We're glad you asked.
Yeah, we have been in that situation. We do currently use a drill, but we have more times than not had access to a drill and been forced and been stuck in this situation of, I want to be conscious of the soil health and manage it, but I know I can't disc. That's not an option. But how do I still get great germination of my food plots? Like that is the question that everyone seems to be falling in that trap, and we've been working over the years.
Yeah, and one thing we talked about on our podcast a while back is when we disc and we plow, we basically, what moisture is in that soil is going to be evaporated through just turning the soil and letting the sun bake it out, or the wind dry it out. So we see people plow and disc, plant the seed, and then say, I'm praying for rain. But you've automatically, just by doing that, you've removed what little moisture was there, and you've already kind of harmed your food plot because you've done that. So for us, the question was, okay, I know that plowing and disking is not good for my soil health and conserving my soil moisture. So what can I do if I don't have that no-till drill? And so we started trying to work on a process, and what we found was basically came down to making sure we had some sort of biomass growing. So if you were planting in the fall, you wanted to have something growing throughout that summer to where you have a plant there or plants there that you could spray, broadcast, and then lay that over with a roller or cultipacker and help almost push that seed next to the soil or onto the soil, and then conserve it and protect it from the birds. And also those morning dews help collect it and almost perform or be a little bit of a greenhouse effect, where you had a lot more moisture down below that thatch that you laid over from the previous growing season. And that is very weather conscious, so you have to be focused on and watching for your rainfall. But the same is true if you're plowing and disking. You're watching for rain, and if you have that seed under a plowed and disc field, you're still begging for rain. The only difference between the two is you've conserved your soil health because of that. And so just by spraying the previous cover crop, so for us, we like to include, as Matt said, so many species, and cereal rye and triticale are some of those that are growing. So in the spring, when we return, we'll have that tall cover crop growing, and we'll spray it and then just lay it over. And after we broadcasted our seed, and had great success with it.
Yeah, so the quick review is use your cover crop that's growing in your field, spray it with a herbicide, broadcast, and then use a cultipacker and just lay it right over top. And that's it. Walk away and do that right before rain. And really, we've had incredible stands and success with using that technique.
And not just stands of, you can broadcast brassicas and weed out on the concrete and get germination. Back of your truck, you spill a bag of seed. But even we've had success with soybeans and other species, corn and all kinds of other spring grains.
But the key is having a cover crop to protect the seed and the rain. Make sure you're doing it right prior to a rain. And with that, man, you really can be conscientious of the soil, not disc it, not till it, not turn it over, and still have great success and great food plots.
Now, one thing I want to talk about, since y'all answered that question, and I'm glad y'all brought up the whole using a crimper or using a roll. We started implementing that as well, especially with our, implementing our summer plots, going to our fall plots by just rolling over soybeans that we had planted in the summertime, and it works phenomenal. And that's something we learned from both you guys and also from Grant Woods as well. But one thing I'd like to talk to you about is if someone, because I know y'all probably have a lot of summer plots in right now. This can be a kind of a two-part question, so each one of y'all can handle a part, I guess. What time do you normally go from your summer plots to your fall plots? As in when you plant that, roll over, everything like that, you're crimping? And then the second part is, for someone that maybe didn't do a summer plot right now, maybe they just picked up some property that they just got permission to, plant a small plot on, they want to do a little kill plot, something like this. What is something that's very easy to grow, that's simple, that someone maybe new, maybe with very basic tools where they have a small tractor, a hand tiller, a four-wheeler with a tiller or something behind it? What is something that's very easy for people to grow that they will have success with possibly in the fall? And I know soil test is very important, and say they've done all that. What's something that they can probably implement for this fall for a good fall plot that would be very easy for them to do?
So I'll answer the first part and let Matt handle the second part. So one thing that we try to get outside of the box of the normal thinking when it comes to food plots is just because it's, and I think, I don't know what's responsible for this, but there's like a 2-week window where everybody says, okay, that's food plot season in the fall, and then another 2-week window in the spring that says, okay, that's food plot season. But there's so many other species that you can plant throughout the growing season or later in the fall that can still provide great forage and for the wildlife. So for us, typically with a lot of our cereal grains, we have to plant 45 to 60 days before the first annual or average frost. So we're looking at sometime in August, mid-August typically. Hopefully we can catch some of those hurricane rains. And that's when we're planting a majority of our fall food plots. But even later into the fall, if we're trying to touch up or we have spots that we didn't get great germination, we'll plant cereal rye, which does really well in the cooler temperatures. So you could even plant it up into October in a lot of places. And then we look at the spring as going, okay, well, we can frost seed in February or even March and get great clover, or we can plant spring peas and some other spring plants in April and have great forage throughout the spring, or we can look at May and even June of planting soybeans and cowpeas and lab and millets and all these things. And even July, you can plant sun hemp and milo and some millets. It all is just weather dependent. If you get the appropriate amount of rain, you can have you could plant almost any month of the year and have great success. minus the hard cold winters. But there's always something you could plant and improve your landscape. Matt?
Yeah, I'll take that second part. And so if a guy is just getting to a new property and trying to establish something for the first time, I'm not really going to shy away from many of the fall annuals at all, whether it's some small seeded clovers, whether it's annuals or perennials. You can plant those with great success. Those can simply be broadcasted on top of the ground prior to a rain, and they will get to the right soil depth without having to really till at all. So you can have a great stand like that. But then again, I'm not going to shy away from turnips, brassicas, your small grains like wheat or rye. I wouldn't be afraid to do any of that, especially with that type of equipment. But again, I wouldn't be turning the soil. I would probably just be using a sprayer, spray out what vegetation may be there if it's an existing field, or if you need to reopen a clearing or expand it some, chainsaw, brush hog, push that back, and then you can get away, especially with these smaller seeds, smaller annual seeds for the fall, with just broadcasting prior to a rain with the right soil amendments and pH. If that's where it needs to be, you can have great stands like that. So again, I'm not going to shy away from really much at all for the fall time.
Well, that's something good to know. I mean, a lot of guys, whether it's their first time doing a plot, or maybe it's just they feel kind of rushed right now. Maybe they just got permission to our property. Actually, we got a couple listeners, and that's one reason I brought that up. Got a couple of listeners that just picked up some properties, and they're wondering what they can do now. Especially maybe they don't have large equipment or this and that. So it's good to kind of see that small seed clover and some other stuff you could broadcast possibly over the vegetation that's there already. And I'm guessing, would you run over the vegetation first if it was, say, knee-high or so with a brush hog at all? Or would you do anything like that before you broadcast or afterwards?
I would prior to broadcasting, I would spray it out. Mm-hmm. I would use herbicide, kill it, and then broadcast and let it just work its way down to the soil, and rain will allow that stuff to germinate. And if it is tall enough, if it is knee-high, hip-high or something like that, you can use a roller or cultipacker and just, once it's dead, roll that right over top, just kind of like we talked about with the food plot plantings, using that cover crop. Use that existing vegetation as a quote unquote cover crop, and just use it to your advantage. Use what's already there to help protect the seed, allow it to germinate. And that first little bit of germination, that first little sprout it gets, that's a really vulnerable time for that seed. It's trying to grow, get sunlight to transfer down to its root system, to establish a good root system to allow it to continue to grow above ground. So if you can protect it with that existing vegetation that's above the soil, whether it is just a old pasture or that old cover crop, allow it to get its root system up, allow it to get some additional forage and growth, that plant will become less susceptible to over browsing because it's deep rooted. So that first little bit of time of its life and exposure above the soil is really pretty critical. So it's kind of twofold. It helps protect it while it's germinating, and then helps protect it while it's getting started.
And that's great. I mean, that's exactly what I wanted to hear, and I think that's given a lot of guys a lot more confidence from listening about this part of the episode on this food plotting and everything, of what they can implement this fall and this summer to kind of have the best success going into this hunting season. But I know there's one other topic we'd like to talk to you guys about, which is a very hot topic as of now, at least maybe more so than it has been in the past, especially in this region of the country, especially being the southeast, which is CWD. A lot of people have been seeing it a ton of just people commenting on their opinions and stuff of what they think about CWD over the last probably 2 or 3 weeks. I've seen it predominantly. I know this is something that's hit home for both me and Andrew, and something that we kind of take very serious. I know y'all are the same way, but I'm going to actually let Andrew kind of take over this portion of it for real quick. I know he's probably got some questions to ask you guys about CWD and your thoughts.
Yeah, so it seems like the world of deer hunting is like caught on fire in the last 2 weeks with CWD, with people like Jay Gregory and Ted Nugent and some other people chiming in saying that CWD is like fake and it's from the government and everything. But I mean, I know that you guys are pretty versed on that stuff because if I remember right, you have CWD in Missouri. So, um, what I see from a lot of people is just anger, man. Like they don't understand it. They think that the government's up to something to get them or something like that. Um, One thing that people get real mad about, which is this is kind of why I wanted to talk about this, was in Alabama, it looks like they're going to ban the use of deer urine because they're afraid it'll transmit CWD into the state. So the whole world's on fire. It's the end of the world. Nobody's ever going to be able to kill a deer again in Alabama. So I was wondering if you guys could speak about that a little bit. You know, what's the meaning behind that? Why are they wanting to ban urine? How likely is it to bring CWD into Alabama? You know, is it transmittable through urine, or are they just trying to ban something to ban it?
Oh man, can of worms. There it went. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So when it comes to CWD, and we won't talk a lot on the science of it or whatever. All we know is CWD is here, and it is bad news as far as if a deer gets CWD, it's going to die. And so it is changing the way we deer hunt. And going back to the kind of the foundation, if you will, of Land and Legacy is trying to replicate nature the best we can. So when it comes to CWD, we try to manage as close to nature as we can. And CWD is transmitted from bodily fluids, so urine, feces, saliva, whatever it is. If a CWD-infected deer has it and he salivates on a mineral block, and another deer comes up and licks that same spot and gets the prion, the prion from the CWD, it gets that deer is now infected with CWD and will die. And so in our state, a lot of counties, MDC, Missouri Department of Conservation, is outlawing mineral and feed in a lot of these counties. In fact, Matt and I aren't in a county that is a CWD zone, but it's kind of around us. It's northern Missouri, but it's south of us now. It's west of us. So sooner or later, we're not going to be able to do it. We went ahead and removed all mineral sites and stop supplemental feeding just because it's a precaution reason. Now, Matt, if I remember right, it was the research out of Wisconsin in a CWD-infected zone. They tested the mineral sites at 11 different areas, and 9 of those areas had the CWD prion in the site, basically, whether it's in the mud, whether it was in the water, 9 out of the 11. So we know that mineral stations can transmit CWD just because so many deer congregate around it. So for us, when you look at urine, that's one way that CWD is transmitted. So if a high fence or wherever they're getting that urine, if there is, and it should, and most likely is tested, but it's just another way to control these things we put out to encourage deer into certain areas. It's just another way that deer could transmit CWD. So trying to eliminate it is basically what we're all about. So any way we can eliminate congregating deer, I think us as well as a lot of government agencies are all about that.
Yeah, another thing is...
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Well, I was just going to say, a lot of people are angry because it changes the way that they're going to go about something that they love. And that's just a knee-jerk reaction. I don't blame them for being angry, but we have to understand what's going on and the potential threat that's out there. No one, honestly, I don't think any scientist or any biologist or any hunter knows the extreme potential or what is truly just going to happen in the future. But if we look at deer hunting and deer as a resource, and again, humans, if we across history, we've been terrible at managing resources. We've abused them, but if we look at the deer as a resource and something that we get enjoyment from, why don't we take and adopt the mindset of trying to preserve it the most we can? So if there is even the slightest chance that that a deer could get CWD through the transfer of urine, through the transfer of mineral sites, all these things that hunters hold dear to them. But if there is the chance that it could help spread it, a deadly disease, then why don't we give that up? Because we can still hunt, even if we don't have urine and if we don't have mineral. I'd rather give that up than give up, CWD potentially hurting my deer herd even more. That to me is just a logical long-term thought process of identifying and realizing that white-tailed deer are a resource that we need to help protect and help manage. And hunters, that's our calling. So there's that, one. And then two, I think for the whole government side of things, is the income that hunting within each state and throughout the entire country gets benefits from. There's huge, because of the taxes that the states generate from the sale of hunting equipment, from the sale of hunting license, that pays people's salaries. So I don't understand why the hunters are claiming that, the government's out to try and stop hunting with all this. I don't understand, because they're trying to limit the amount of deer. Like it doesn't all add up to me in my mindset of they wouldn't be doing what they're doing if they wanted to shut us down.
Yeah,
I don't get it.
I think we can all agree nobody loves money more than the government, so why would they do something that would eliminate money?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with y'all. And CWD is really a scary subject because, like you said, nobody knows what's going to happen in the future with it. And, whether it's potential population level impacts for deer or whatever, for me, the biggest thing is if in the future somehow CWD could make the jump to humans. And it's if you figured out that CWD could jump to humans and it was 100% fatal, and there's like a 50% chance that the deer you shot might have it, would you eat that deer? And if you're not going to eat the deer, how many people are going to keep hunting? Nobody's going to go out there and put in all that work, shoot a deer, and then not eat it. Not many people at least.
That's right.
So, I mean, it's scary for hunting in general, because something like that, I mean, that would really, I mean, that might be a nail in the coffin to hunting, man. I mean, that's scary to think about. That could be the end, and thus the end of hunter-funded conservation. But kind of another question I've seen floating around out there is people say, well, they want to ban the mineral stations and the bait sites. Well, then why don't they just ban mock scrapes and food plots too, since they're congregating deer? Can you speak a little bit on that subject?
Oh, man, you're trying to get your viewership just to hate us, aren't you? Oh, when it comes to food plots, and this goes with the whole, this is a debate. Long before I was having this debate with CWD, I was having the debate of, is a bag of corn the same as a food plot? No, stop it. That's nonsense. It takes a lot of things to get a food plot to be successful, and even then, we don't know if they're going to come into the end to where they're in shooting range or not. And so food plots, it's just, especially the kind that we plant and the things we do, it's not like we're congregating deer into a 10-foot circle. And a 10-foot circle food plot is probably not going to be very successful anyway.
It's not going to last but a day.
It's not going to last very long, and it's not going to be the year-round attraction that a mineral station or a feeder may be. So the comparison, when you look at the amount of time spent at a feeder or mineral site in that specific location to a food plot, there's just really no comparison. So it's hard to put the two there. Now, mock scrape might be a little different.
Well, that's the thing about a mock scrape, though. Whether you have that mock scrape there in place, close to a stand, is that going to stop deer from scraping anywhere else? Like, they're still going to do it. It's a natural process, and the fact that if that mock scrape isn't there, they're going to go down the ridge another 40 yards and hit a branch there. Or they're going to go down another 40. Like, they're going to check them every single year, and they're going to check tons of them, and they're always going to pee in them. That's their natural behavior. So it doesn't really matter a location in which they're at, because if they're out there, they're going to hit them. And that I don't understand, I guess, necessarily that argument as well, because to me, I see it as it's just a location change of where a scrape is going to be at. And they're always going to hit scrape. So whether it's there or not, again, there's still going to be deer focusing on one area, scraping and peeing, pawing in the mud.
That's right. And I think when you look at a deer, let's go back to before there was any bag that you could buy at a store, before there was any settlement. Let's just look at whitetail deer in its natural environment. It was scraping, rubbing, browsing, all kinds of things to survive. But along come anything that gets them out of their natural cycle or the natural system could cause harm, especially when we're dealing with CWD. And you look at confining the deer to a mineral site or a feeder, that definitely changes their natural travel, their natural way of living. So that could definitely cause problems.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you guys on that subject. And it's like with the food plot thing. I mean, that's really pretty obvious to me. I mean, there's a big difference between 12 deer licking one rock versus 12 deer feeding out in a 2-acre field. There's a lot less direct contact there, I guess you could say.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so with CWD on the march and everything, a lot of people were very misinformed about it, including some hunting celebrities, sadly, with their big platforms, kind of hurting us, I guess. What are some sources that you guys know of that people could go to learn more about CWD? Some credible sources where they can go and look stuff up, learn about it, how it's transmitted, what it means, all that stuff.
One of the biggest ones is going to be QDMA, Quality Deer Management Association. They have incredible employees and staff that work there that are in contact with the leading biologists, with the leading scientists that are actively researching this disease. They go to conferences, they sit in, they are there to protect the heritage of hunting whitetail deer. So they are hunters just like you and I, but they're extremely smart and understand and have the resources available to them to then in turn share information with us. And we know them personally. They're very credible, very good guys who are out there trying to learn just like you and I are about this disease and try and make the most sense of what is out there and implement the best management practices we can to limit the spread of CWD. And I guess the other thing is your own brain is the other resource to go to. And I say that because there is so much false information out there. And a lot of it, if we stop and think about it and just consider it, the logicalness of it for 5 minutes, we can completely unravel many of the thoughts and the theories and the myths that are floating out there from people, like you said, that have these large platforms that are spreading this type of information. So, if you're consuming that and you're questioning it, think about it logically for a little bit, and you'll probably be able to pick up on whether or not it's solid or there's some fallacy in it. So if you're, I guess, on social media, be logical and go hit the like button on QDMA and follow their stuff.
Absolutely. So I guess what you're saying is go out and listen to some snot-nosed biologists, as Jay Gregory calls them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, if I have problems with my car, I go to a mechanic. If I want to learn more about cows, I go to the cattle farmer that actually has experience with them. So I don't know why sometimes we look at these other guys that are nowhere near biologists, and they look at them and say, I want to learn. I think that guy's got CWD figured out.
Amen. Well, we're about at the point where we need to stop here, so I guess that we're going to end this on a lighter note. Put the worms back in the can, and I want to end this by asking you guys what your plans are for this fall. I know that I've seen y'all hunt in Kansas a few times lately, so what do you guys have on the itinerary for your deer season?
we're getting her kicked off early, and we are headed to Nebraska,
Ooh, yes,
western
sir.
Nebraska,
Awesome.
for a September velvet chance spot and stalk mule deer whitetail hunt.
I'm jealous.
Yep, that's how we're kicking it off. And then here in Missouri, it's September 15th. So we will be trying to chase some velvet bucks or get on some deer on some white oak acorns. And then, of course, we will be all around. We're not going back to Kansas this year. So we'll be all around Missouri. We've got several farms to hunt. And then we will likely be doing a duck hunt in Arkansas, down around Stuttgart with our friends at Stratton Seed. And at some point in December or late November, I will be out of commission with hunting, and I will be at the hospital. My wife and I are expecting our first child. So
congratulations.
It'll be an interesting. Yeah, I appreciate that. Very exciting times for us, but it definitely is going to be a little bit of a change to my typical late season hunting patterns.
I guess.
So I'll be self-filming late winter.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, guys.
What about you guys?
Well, I'm starting off a month earlier than normal. We usually open up in Alabama October 14th or 15th, but I'm buying a Georgia license this year, and they open September 8th. So I'm probably this Saturday, actually, I'm going to be running over to Georgia WMA, and I'm going to be looking for some muscadines and some persimmons and some white oaks to get on. And hopefully I can come away with a velvet buck. And then hunt in Alabama after that. And then I got a friend, Steve Angel, from Traditional Outdoors. He is, I hope he wasn't kidding, because I'm taking him up on it. He said he'd put me on a bear in North Georgia. So
Cool.
I'm going to go up there with him.
That's real cool.
But other than that, and Georgia goes 15 days later with turkeys. So that's pretty nice. But Jacob, what are your plans?
Ooh.
Yeah, so my plans, just moving to Tennessee, which is pretty cool. Both Matt and Adam, I don't know if y'all know this. Again, it didn't get much media coverage. Tennessee just passed a new season for whitetails. They're going to have an August velvet buck hunt. It's going to be the 24th to the 26th. So the only issue is it's on private land. Both me and Andrew are big public land hunters. This is only for private land, which is kind of a downside, but I got permission from a buddy of mine, so we're going to be able to hunt some property. So that's going to be going on in August. Then I'm going to be hunting, of course, Tennessee, Alabama. I've still got my license for Ohio. I've got a couple spots picked out on some public land in southern Ohio, which are going to be dynamite. Also, I'm going to try to maybe get out to, I don't know, Kentucky. I don't know. That may or may not happen. Then we have, as Arnold mentions, that are possibilities is North Carolina and Arkansas. So I'm going to have a very, very busy fall, but hopefully very exciting. So we'll see how that goes, but definitely going to be very busy, doing a lot of filming. Hopefully be able to go down on that bear hunt with Andrew and film for him. That should be a good time. And again, just
Sweet.
kind of plan for next turkey season. So, I mean, it's like second one season's over, you look at something else, or like you said, duck hunting. Actually, I'm going to be, forget about that, going to be going to Arkansas and Illinois, both on duck/snow goose hunts. So that should be a really good time as well. But
I have a question.
Okay.
Do you work?
Yes.
Do you work?
I do. And the one good thing I will say, guys, about being single is having a little more flexibility around everything.
A little more money?
Yeah.
Well, that too. Yeah, I'm in medical sales and kind of get to make my own schedule.
Nice.
Hope my boss isn't listening. But anyways, guys, yeah, we'll get off that subject. But yeah, so I might have a little more free time than the average individual. So,
Attaboy.
Nice.
anyways, guys, but yeah,
You got to use it to your advantage, right?
That is right. It's trying to be as efficient as possible. I mean, still get it done at work. You just got to get it done also in the woods too. And that's been my thing. I've been so busy right now with closing a couple pretty big deals lately. I haven't even been out and scouted much in Tennessee, unfortunately. But I'm going to be running some trail cameras this weekend on that private land. We're going to have that velvet hunt on. So hopefully we can get some pictures of some bucks over the next month and kind of get our game plan set for that. But it's definitely going to be a busy fall, as I know y'all's will too, because I know y'all are going to be working along with hunting and traveling. So I know y'all's plate will be extremely full, if I had to guess.
Oh, thanks for putting that in front of our face. Yeah.
Hey, I mean, you got to say it how it is. But
That's right. That's right. Oh, yeah, it's definitely going to be a fun fall, and hopefully you guys keep us posted on your success, and we'll keep you posted on our failures, and we'll have a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I can't thank you enough for making time to come on today. And for all the listeners out there, y'all need to go check out Land and Legacy Podcast on the Sportsman's Nation Podcast Network. I've been listening to them since they started, and it's good stuff. And if you're not listening to it, you're missing out.
Well, we appreciate that. Yeah, for sure. We post 2 podcasts every single week, one devoted to habitat and land, one devoted to hunting, and we'd love for you guys to check it out. We sure did enjoy our time with you guys right here.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we will see you next week.